It's amazing speaking here because you can't see anybody in the audience, so anything you do cannot faze me, so just be yourself, it's all good. I want to talk to you today, this morning. Well, first of all, I want to thank you because whoever was out partying yesterday, showing up this early is a sign of dedication to the cause, so that's good. We need more people like you. I'm here and I wasn't early in bed, so it's good. It's not good, but fair enough. I want to talk about JavaScript today and how to become a more happy JavaScript developer, not a better, not a most amazing, not a rock star developer, not like a ninja, a unicorn, whatever we want to call ourselves, but just understand that JavaScript has changed so much over the last few years that it's just not the same thing that we used to do. And it's not, you're not falling behind, you're not as good, other people are not better than you all the time. It's just a matter of like that it grew from a language into this massive infrastructure that we cannot understand all the things. It's just impossible to do humanly. And I got inspiration by a great book that I found on Google Play the other day that's called It's Just You, Everything Is Not Shit. Which is a list of all beautiful things, of all things that we should be happy about and we should be actually celebrating. These are great things that are on this planet that we can use. And it's the same with JavaScript to a degree that, of course, there's many things that we can complain about, but a lot of the things in there are just true the same way they were when I started with JavaScript in 1999. They haven't come better, they haven't gone worse, they just changed a bit. So the title said it's five ways to be a happier JavaScript developer, but I think I give you 2 extras today because I love you that much. This was a meme that was going around for quite a while, where you had like the JavaScript book and the JavaScript The Good Parts book in comparison next to each other. And it's a pretty unfair comparison because JavaScript The Good Parts talks about Douglas Crockford wrote about the things that are great about the language as a construct, as a syntactic language, as a functional language, the way we use it. Whereas JavaScript, the Rhino book, is basically everything that JavaScript ever had to do in every horrible environment possible. So all the browser-specific things, all the non-standard browser-specific things are in there. So over the years, it's basically a memory of all the horrible things we had to do and people had to suffer through to get to the JavaScript, the good part. So the good part is actually what JavaScript is to a degree nowadays. I learned everything from that JavaScript Rhino book in 1999, and I was so happy when I wrote a chapter for it. I was a tech editor of a chapter for it. Sadly enough, it was the chapter for XML and JavaScript, which is something you shouldn't do. But when you get the offer to be part of that book that you learned everything from, you jump on it, and it's a fun thing to do. Now, the 7 things I'm going to plow through here is that understanding JavaScript is not a language, concentrating on the now, limiting our development environment, making it harder to write bad code, getting to know our tooling, giving back to others, and muffling the noise that is happening around JavaScript. So let's start with understanding that JavaScript is not a language. It is a language, it's defined as a language, but it's much more than that, and it grew into something completely different. It is a lot of things. It's far from perfect. That's for sure. I mean, like when you do like type of not a number and it says number, then you need a special kind of person to get their head around that kind of thing. And it took the date format from Java, which is not a good idea either because it hasn't been updated in donkey's years, and so on and so forth. It's everywhere though. JavaScript runs on everything nowadays. I mean, you see people giving coffee machine talks where they talk to their coffee machine in JavaScript. Every browser has JavaScript enabled. And I remember when Flash was the cool thing and Adobe was basically advertising with 99% of the computers on this planet, on the internet, have Flash enabled. Well, 100% of those have JavaScript enabled. It's up to the user to disable it. And we as browser makers made it much, much harder to disable it by now because it's a developer thing to disable it, not an end-user thing. It's also free to use. When I started with JavaScript, I loved it because I used a text editor and I started writing JavaScript and I used the browser and I started playing in it. I didn't have to download or pay for or pirate a copy of Borland C++ Builder or whatever, or an IDE that I had to learn for 4 weeks. A text editor would do the job. And environment independent. So I went from my Windows machine to Linux to Mac, and all of those JavaScript worked on. And all of these environments I could use JavaScript in. I didn't need to have one certain environment, a certain mobile phone with a certain operating system and a certain cable that they change every year because they want to make money off you. But I'm not bitter about this, and this is off topic right now. It's freely documented. It's basically, you didn't need to buy a JavaScript book. It was good when you bought my book because I was happy. And I basically wrote it so my parents would shut up about what I do because I couldn't explain to them what I do. They don't know what computers are. But as soon as they had a book in their hand, they basically were happy and showed it to people when they visited us. So everything we looked up in the past on the internet was JavaScript things. I mean, the HTML drive and these kind of things, these copy and paste things to do HTML days. And everything was on the web and freely documented. You didn't have to go through an extra course to learn JavaScript. And it's instantly gratifying, and that was why it beat everything else that I wrote before. I used to write assembly, then I wrote Perl, and in JavaScript I just fiddle around with it. I reload the browser and like, cool, this thing is already happening. There's no build process in between where my computer goes for a coffee break for like 15 minutes and then I realized I forgot a semicolon somewhere. JavaScript immediately runs in the browser and I see what mistakes I made, and it was great for that. The versatility of JavaScript, what it can be applied to, and there's many, many things, means that there's diverse needs. So when I, for example, go for web scripts, that's what most people started with JavaScript, and then they didn't understand, and they used jQuery. So like, how do I make that button blink or move when I click on it? Oh, cool, this is JavaScript. This is what it does. Then, of course, we went for web-view-based solutions like Electron, like Slack. Most editors out there are actually HTML, JavaScript, or TypeScript, JavaScript-based software running inside a container that can be installed as a native application on different desktops. Then we have browser extensions, which everybody loves. Everybody loves extending browsers. As a browser maker, I'm working on Edge right now. I used to work on Firefox before. Extensions are the bane of our existence because they're the biggest security attack point and also the biggest performance problems for our browsers. But I think the browsers became as successful as they were because they were extensible. And writing an extension for a browser is also done in JavaScript. Web-based apps, PWA. I'm going to go later on to a meetup here in Oslo, give a PWA talk as well there. Server-side solutions, Node. JavaScript started as LiveScript, actually, by Netscape on the server side before it actually went into the browser. But now we do a lot of stuff in Node on the server side and also on the client side. Convertible to binary formats. WebAssembly is the big thing. You probably heard about Blazor yesterday, where we tried to make C# happen in the browser. So you can write it in your grade code and turn it into JavaScript with WebAssembly. And powering robots. Notebots are a thing that actually happening out there. So JavaScript works everywhere. We even have a package manager, NPM now. So if you go back to the Peckle days of Perl, we now have that in JavaScript as well. It all goes in circles. We always say like, oh, the old stuff that we don't want to do anymore, we're going to repeat it in 5 years and call it innovation. That's quite fun how we work. So JavaScript is so much more now than we ever expected it to be. It was just this little language that I can make interactive things on the web, but it became much more. It's a standardized language for starters. The TC39, the ECMAScript committee, is standardizing the language, and we finally have a language definition, not like what some browser makers think JavaScript is and other browser makers think what JavaScript is, and whatever Microsoft thought when we made like, what was JScript? Don't do that. It's like we have a standardized language, let's make the standard work. It's also an ecosystem, like the whole NPM and the whole Node environment is an ecosystem of JavaScript where we write software much like we would in other languages, and we deploy software like we do in other languages as well. And it's a community, a big community, almost a too big community. It's like 2 JavaScript events every day at the moment, but it's something to dive into and get help and to help other people in it as well. And it's an opportunity to do a lot with one language. It's always quite fun when people say, it's just JavaScript. And I'm like, well, it's your API written in JavaScript that I need to learn. It's that random endpoint. It's that random hardware that it runs on. So just JavaScript is always a weird thing. And it's a chance to cause damage, performance and safety. Because it's so easy to learn JavaScript and so easy to deploy JavaScript and use it, you can make a lot of mistakes with it as well. And you can actually make a server that is completely vulnerable, much like you can set up an Apache to be completely vulnerable. And sometimes I think we underestimate that when we say we're a full-stack developer and we put something on the internet. Now, I think it's time to relax, though. In a world of options, nobody can be an expert in all of them. If you're confused about what Node is, but you like working in the browser in JavaScript, good for you. Cool. Concentrate on that. Know the limits of the other stuff. Appreciate what other people are doing in the other parts of JavaScript, but you don't need to know everything. You can always learn that as you need it. When I worked as a consultant or I worked in an agency, every product we made was a different platform, was a different programming language, was a different environment. For 2 years, I accumulated so much knowledge that I completely forgot 3 weeks later. And this is also a truth of our market that we should embrace more. Now, concentrating on the now is a very important thing in JavaScript. I think worries of the past shouldn't prevent us from creating. When you're like me and you get like these flashbacks to Internet Explorer 4, 5, Netscape 4, Netscape 3 Gold communicator, and these kind of things that I had to use in the past, I look at the JavaScript and I'm like, this is bad, we should optimize. And I'm like, what am I doing? This is dead. This environment doesn't exist anymore. And nowadays, evergreen browsers, this is fine. Don't let the worries of the past stop you from playing with JavaScript, or even more, let's stop telling new people coming to JavaScript that it's terrible because of problems we had 20 years ago. This is not helping anybody, and it's actually just us showing off like, I went through that pain, I want to get something back. You won't get something back. Just be happy with what you have these days. On the other hand, it can be also depressing to focusing exclusively on the new and cool. Like if I have my Chrome Canary running and my Insider Windows build, everything is beautiful and everything is cool, and our end users that are out there and basically will never see what I'm doing. One thing that depresses me a lot as a browser maker right now is that every time we create something incredible and we standardize it, the bad people of the internet are the first ones to use it. I still don't know any sensible use case for web Bluetooth, but it's used already by malicious ads to actually fingerprint computers. So by the time we roll something out and we get developers excited, people already found a way to exploit it. And there's a few talks about this here, actually, and it's kind of depressing. So I think being on the bleeding edge is great, but we should always understand that our end users aren't there yet. So work towards that, but don't expect it from anybody out there, because you're not building things for other developers. Unless you build things for other developers, then good for you. If you want to know anything about JavaScript, and look it up, MDN Web Docs at developermozilla.org is the place to go. This is not because I worked on that thing when I worked in Mozilla, but because we shut down all the Microsoft web technology documentation and put it on MDN as well, because we realized this is the resource that's alive, that people are maintaining, that is understanding, has code examples, has like support things in there, which browser supports what information. This is the one place to go. Where you don't go is W3 schools, because you're an evil person if you do that and you send it out to people, because it needs to die in a fire. But that's just a slight feeling that I have about this. But this is a great resource to learn everything about the web. And I'm very happy that Mozilla exists and actually makes it. And it took us 3 years to merge these two because of lawyers, not because of technology, because the the CMS that runs it is totally fine with our data going in there as well. Google puts their stuff there, Samsung puts their stuff there. Everybody who works on the web maintains this. And we used to have the webplatform.org before as well, and that got shut down as well. This is now the one resource. Another thing to look at all the time is caniuse.com. So this is where you see parts of JavaScript and what the support in different browsers is. What is green is good, what is red is not good. And sometimes there's a yellow, and there's full explanations what the yellow means. And there's also links on the bottom through to the specifications and demos and polyfills and so on and so forth. So if you wonder about using something, caniuse.com is the place to go. Now, what I like is right now is that we can limit our development environment, and I've done that lately a lot, because I'm kind of tired of like every conference that I am talking about this trinity of web development. What I mean by that, the first one is the editor. We have got all these like handbags out, fights about which editor is the best one and which one to use. So in editors, we code in editors. That's what they're for. But we're also we tweak themes. So every week there's a new theme that you should use, or you're not a professional developer. Ligatures in code fonts. If you don't use that, you're not a professional developer. Oh, you use white background. I use black background. You're a terrible person, because you use a black background. I'm like, just shut up. Just let's just code and use the thing and do something good in there. It's also where we mix spaces and tabs like animals. The second part is then once we coded the things, where we actually deploy it and where we package it and where we make it run is in the terminal. The terminal in this case is, of course, on the Mac. It's your iTerm2, or it's your terminal built-in, or your ZSH. On my Windows machine, I'm using Ubuntu right now, and I'm going to Kali for a few fun things as well. So we got all the terminals in all the operating systems for you. And that's why we do version control. That's where CVS, I almost said. That's where Git comes in, and that's where GitHub comes in. And there we also run build tasks, and there we also deploy, and there we also tweak themes. That's another thing. Like, everybody has their theme for the terminal, and we write long blog posts and give talks about how to tweak your terminal to be more effective, while we're actually not finishing code because we're spending too much time tweaking our terminal. The last thing is the browser. And the browser is, of course, where we see the stuff. We debug in the browser. Every browser has developer tools that are immensely cool. I mean, I'm working with all the other browser makers, and what we do in developer tools, the kind of depressing thing is, like, you see all these talks about what developer tools can do, and then you see the under-the-hood specific stats, what people are really using. About 2 or 3 things of these 600 that we have in developer tools. So there's a lot of like, oh, you could use this, but people just don't. Where we check and we tweak visual output, and where we audit. So auditing in the browser and testing in the browser is a very important thing. Now, the problem that I have with this trinity is that we also annoy people with log messages. Like, the live sites out there that still have log messages in there is just very unprofessional and very dangerous as well. My problem is that this is a lot of duplication and multiplication with choice. So we keep ourselves super busy by tweaking all of these 3 things, by telling everybody, oh, there's a new terminal out, you should be using that as a U editor out. And I actually don't want to jump between them all the time. I don't want to just write CSS and then have to go to the terminal and build it, and then have to set up my node server to do the build with the packaging and whatever, and then go to the browser and edit it again. Why don't we do that in one environment, and why don't we have that way much more time to concentrate on our code? And this is what I've been doing lately a lot. So tooling is actually starting to overtake our historically grown trinity. These things start to merge again. So good editors actually consolidate features to avoid context switching. So you don't need to leave your editor to do the 2 other things, like the GitHub thing and the building thing and the auditing thing. Now, I don't care what editor you use, as long as it's Visual Studio Code, because I'm working on that one. And it's just gorgeous. I mean, it's like, it uses GitHub's packaging and install mechanism. It uses Google's browser, and it uses Microsoft's Visual Studio IntelliSense stuff. So all the people working together on this open source project, written in TypeScript, which is just nuts if you think about it. So VS Code, if you don't know it, it's open source, it's cross-platform, it's hundreds of extensions for everything that you ever want to have or not to have. It's highly themable, so yeah, you can complain about white backgrounds, black backgrounds, pink backgrounds, whatever you want to do. It's got built-in source control support. So when I teach people about web development these days, instead of just going to the terminal and so like, and here's how you deploy, it's like, okay, did you see that? You just saved this, and now it says there's a merge and green thing. Click on that, type a comment, and it sends it off to the server, and it's already available. How cool is that? I don't have to jump to the terminal and get people afraid of the green thing that they don't want to understand. It's got a built-in terminal. So under your editor, you got the terminals. You don't need to switch to the other app there. And it integrates into build processes. It actually is written and extensible in TypeScript, which is nuts to think about. Like when you write the editor that you use for writing TypeScript in TypeScript, that's quite bizarre. And it straightens and lightens teeth with repeat use, the more you use it. And it's also possibly good against hair loss, and it's gluten-free or macrobiotic. So these are all reasons why you should be using Visual Studio Code. And I love these little things that you see, like VS Code's autocomplete is amazing. I get like 60% of the letters right, or what I want, it still guesses the right thing. request options. I can roll my face on the keyboard and still be close. And I love this. This is what editors should do for me. I should not have to know which uppercase, lowercase, camel case thing that is. I used to be a PHP developer. No, I don't want to look these things up because they're different in every function name anyways. So what you can do as well, you can debug Node in it. So if you have Node running and you want to write Node, you can just say like debug tools in Node itself, and then down in the terminal, in the built-in one, you can run your code, and then it goes into the breakpoint, and your Node instance gets interrupted, and you can debug it there rather than having to do it in the terminal yourself. So you can stay in that environment and see what happens. And this is only possible because we have like virtualized headless browsers. We have like JavaScript itself is a runtime, and Node is a runtime as well. So you can embed that into your editor. You don't need to do it in the terminal. Burke Holland, my colleague, wrote a great article called Visual Studio Can Do That, ? Where it explains all these things if you want to go to. So instead of using your own machine, why not try online before? I love that we, instead of explaining in an email 50 times what I've done wrong and what I should be doing, just write a JS bin. Just put it there and say, like, what am I doing wrong? And people can start editing with you and showing you and forking it and doing a copy of it and showing you where the problems are. And you don't have to explain your code. You just show it to people and they help you. There's now, of course, CodePen.io, which is a super inspirational thing for creative coding kind of stuff. And there's glitch.com, which is up and coming. And it's basically allowing you to write apps in the browser and deploy them onto GitHub immediately from the browser as well. So these things are great for learning with each other and sharing with each other. VS Code now has a mode now where you can code together with other people live. So that's quite fun as well, especially when you fight each other over lines and stuff. I like that these things make it much harder to write bad code. I mean, I love, for example, when I use Word and I write a word wrong, it gives me these squiggly lines under it. And editors do these things now as well, and I love that we have them. So when you write JavaScript and you want to have a stricter code, you can actually turn on the TS, the TypeScript compiler, just by doing a comment above it saying TS check, and out of a sudden, all the things that are wrong in your JavaScript or that need to be fixed get squiggly lines under them, and there's a little light bulb next to it that you can click on and explains to you what you've been doing wrong. And how cool is that? Rather than like having to know what I did wrong or get some cryptic error message like IE used to give me like undefined is not defined, and I'm like, great, I don't want a philosophical browser, I want to have an error. You see what you're doing wrong while you're doing it, and I wish more people would understand that. Linting to me is much more powerful than debugging, because I find mistakes while I make them. They're based on the experience and consensus of many others. So I can disagree with a lot of the things a linter says, but sometimes there's a good reason for it. I learn from explanations of linting results rather than getting random error messages. And I install and configure or use built-in linting. So most editors have built-in linting now. But in essence, what it means, I moved from knowing everything to learning by making mistakes. And as I said before, JavaScript has become so big, you cannot know everything any longer. And that's good. My head is full of information what Internet Explorer 6 and 5 and 7 did wrong. I want to purge this. I want to get rid of this, but it's burned in there because of the pain I had to go through. And you don't need to do that anymore. Auditing is another big thing. Lighthouse is a part of the Google Developer Toolkit, for example, developer tools. You can audit your work before you go live. You can actually run it against like how PWA ready it is, how good quality your code is. You can learn from explanations of why these are mistakes. You can keep iterating until it becomes a second nature, so you don't actually make these mistakes anymore. And you have linting and validation tools that can be part of your release process. This is SonarWall. If you haven't tried that one yet, you can come to the Microsoft booth later. I can show it a bit. We're working on that. We have to change the name again because of copyright and whatever. I don't know. But basically, what it tells you put a URL in there, and it shows you everything that you've done wrong in terms of accessibility, in terms of security, in terms of standard compliance, and cross-browser support. So you can do this on the command line as well as part of your continuous integration and get like a unit test back, or you can just do it in the browser to play with your website from time to time. So getting to know our tooling, to me, is the superpower that we have right now that we should be thinking about more. It's true that the tools have become much more complex. People looking at like the developer tools in Chrome nowadays to like the alert that we used to do is like, oh my God, I don't have time for that. But it's really like sharpening the saw. Like learning it the first time and understanding this thing makes you much more powerful in the near future. It gives you superpowers and insight how to build great solutions. The biggest thing, if you're still doing it, please move away from console log and use breakpoints instead, because then you can jump from Node to JavaScript in the browser and whatever easier, and you get full insights, and we don't get these random console log messages in live sites any longer. It's just a very not unprofessional, it's just a very lazy way of debugging, where we got so much more better tools with breakpoints nowadays. Now, once you're happy with JavaScript, I think it's time to give back to others and to take part in the JavaScript community. You can help document things. Even if you don't want to code, help a good JavaScript project and fix some typos, write some explanations, these kind of things. And this is also great for your CV because people look at GitHub and out of a sudden you're part of that JavaScript library that everybody loves. Great. Help clean up and send pull requests. Publish your own work as open source. That, of course, means it's scary, but it's also great because I get run over by a bus. My stuff survives. And enjoy meetups and events. You do right now, I guess. You can enjoy meetups later on as well. There's, as I said, one every day at the moment. And help by example, not by telling people what they should do. This whole, like, you're not a professional developer if you don't do this, it's just horse shit. I'm very tired of this. It's like, I've been 20 years in the IT world, and I've seen everything come and go. And what is a professional developer? Is somebody who's flexible enough to see that younger developers have great new ideas, and you should listen to them and empower them, and not tell them, this has never worked, it will never work in the future either. Now, there's a lot of noise around JavaScript. There's lots of stuff happening, and you think you're falling behind if you don't know the things. And not everybody cares about the nuts and bolts or has endless time to invest. So instead of explaining people like why they done things wrong and which JavaScript environment is the one that they should be installing, just help them with their problem and let them be on their merry way and then find their next mistake themselves. Don't make them dependent on you as the expert. It's easy to get tempted to sell people your experience as a best practice. And a best practice to me is found. It's never defined. A best practice differs from project to project, from environment to environment. What's a best practice in Node is not necessarily a best practice in a mobile JavaScript application or in a browser extension. So these things are, whenever somebody says that's best practice, and I'm like, well, how has it proven itself? Which department, which company, which product became much more successful by being a best practice? Otherwise, it's just this is how to do it, rather than like proving it to people. Great example, find the largest item in the array. That's the kind of horseshit questions we give people in interviews. So back in the days when I started with JavaScript, I probably would have something like that. Largest in array, let temp 0, loop over it, and then find out if it's bigger than the last one, and the biggest one gets stored in the temp, and then I return the temp array. And then, of course, I remembered that doing the array length iteration on every, reading on every iteration of the loop was very slow in Internet Explorer 6. That's why it's a terrible way of coding. So what we do instead is like we also cache the length of the array in all, and then do the while loop backwards over it, because it doesn't matter which order we're going it through, and find the temp thing there. Then you actually start thinking about like, hey, there's native options for that. I don't need that if statement that actually does which one is bigger than the other. There's math max for that. So I do the math max array all and temp to get that one. Then I start actually looking at the documentation of JavaScript. Maybe there's something you can use. And you find out that it's array sort and reverse 0 does the same thing. And then you look at the newer versions of JavaScript and you find out that you have a method called mathmax ... That this is 3 characters and not the typographically correct ellipsis pisses me off, but that's a different thing. Now the question is, which one is the best? And the answer is, of course, it depends. The question is like, who is writing the code? Where does it run? How clean is the data we deal with? What horrible old environment needs support? Who will maintain it? How likely is it ever to change? How will it be used? These are all the questions about like what is the best part of code that we do. So we cannot just say like this is the way to do it. So validating and triaging is a skill that I think more and more people should learn. Let's not feel bad if not everything in the JS world excites us. If somebody talks to me about the newest package that they did to do that thing, and I'm like, good for you. I discovered a few JavaScript patterns. I've got people coming up to me and saying like, oh my God, your JavaScript pattern saved me this life and did this. And I'm like, oh, that's what it does. It's amazing how much more intelligent people are that are using my things than I am. And I love that we in this world, that they can be excited about it and I don't need to be anymore. Not everything hot and cool is ready to replace what we're comfortable with. So if somebody writes a loop with an all iteration on every iteration, that's fine, because we optimize the JavaScript engines to do that better nowadays. It doesn't if it doesn't make your lives easier, it is okay not to use it. Hype moves fast and forgets fast. You don't need to use React on everything, Vue on everything, Dojo on everything, jQuery on everything. If you don't have time to triage it and to understand it, then probably it's not for you, and it's totally okay to write the thing that you've done. You can use a 5-year-old solution if it makes you happy and you release things. We're a delivery mechanism. We're there to build things so people can do things. This is what we're for. It's not to make us happy. We get paid, so we're not happy. No, we get paid, so we're happy, even though we're not necessarily happy with what we have to code. Let's be excited, but also be ready to give it a meh. Like when there's a drama about something cool and you have no opinion, don't jump into that thread. Don't be that person that says like, oh, I gotta be that because the cool kids are talking about it. I don't care anymore. Projection isn't good. What makes us effective can be very subjective. Like me being now inside code only is happy for me. Other people who would want to work for 100% in the terminal and open up Vim in another tab, fine for them as well. It makes sense to talk about our success. So instead of telling people, you should be using this, tell them, I use this, it makes me successful and happy. Maybe it works for you as well. Here is why it made me successful. Here is how it measurably made that project better and made our developers stay longer in the company and not leaving and these kind of things. It makes less sense trying to force others to do the same as you do. And new approaches lead to new happy paths. Let's not discourage people from finding theirs. So as I said, if a new engineer comes up to me and says like everything I do is bullshit, I'm like, okay, I used to be you, fine. Give me what you have. Tell me, show me what you got. And then like, okay, cool, this makes sense. I understand where you're coming from now. Let's not kid ourselves about the bleeding edge, though. That the amazing new idea of today often becomes the problem of tomorrow. Like jQuery UI is in many, many websites. It's very, very slow. Also a security problem in some non-upgraded versions and so on and so forth. Production code moves less fast than we think. So every time we think like, oh, this library is 2 days old and we should be using it, you'll probably not be able to roll it out in an enterprise company. Our end users aren't guinea pigs or canaries. They actually rely on our stuff to work. So when we want to do something cool that is like experimental and might blow up in their face, we didn't help anybody. And it is the bleeding edge. Make sure you have enough blood to give. So if you're actually on the bleeding edge, you have to have time. You have to have time to test things and give feedback. It's a great place to play, but it's also something that costs a lot of time. So let's make a great community out of JavaScript. Let's be the people we'd like to have met when we started, not the arrogant people that told us we're doing everything wrong. Let's be kind. Let's be understanding why people make mistakes and why people do things in a certain way. Let's be supportive to new people, and let's allow people to learn by making mistakes and letting off steam. So of course they're going to be angry at things and say that Microsoft is shit and Google is shit and Vue.js and React.js is shit. And, let them rant for a while and then like, okay, how can I help you? What is really the problem that you're having here? Let's not get lost in pointless drama. We have a limited amount of time on this earth, and we have an even more limited time to make our mark in this environment. So let's not get into drama, but actually be happy about what we have. And JavaScript is a freaking cool thing to work in. So thank you very much.